I'm Laurence Llewelyn-Bowen with an invitation. Why don't you come with me on my gentle stroll through the history, culture, and alchemy of interior design? I'm about to start flirting with the juiciest of juicy colours. Rainbows fascinated our forebears. Actually, when you think about it, it took humankind quite a long time to work out what these exquisitely insubstantial aerial spectres were. All over the world's belief systems, rainbows, those scintillating arcs of soft focus colour, have been used to denote supernatural snakes or dragons, divine bows, or, for both Buddhists and Norsemen alike, a rainbow is a bridge to heaven. And I think it's rather nice. Think of saffron-clad monks with serenely shaved heads jostling humongously smelly tattooed Vikings as they both trudge up the rainbow on their way towards their Asgard or their Nirvana. The fun of a rainbow happens when you're colouring it in and you don't even bother to stick between the lines. The filmy movement of one colour into another creates so many new and exciting possibilities. It's like you're making new colours up as you go along, and hey, I've built a career on it. Secondary colours and tertiary colours are what happen when the three primaries are allowed to copulate, and the merged DNA that emerges creates some of the most densely interesting colours, colours laden with stories, with associations. These colours also provide the most biddable shades for decorators. A bright blue room will never be restful, but paint that same room a teal blue, where yellow brings warmth and depth to the blueness of the blue, and you'll find a space that feels both infinite and intimate. Clever colourists know it's the amount of yellow in a blue or green in a red that makes it easier to bend to your aesthetic will. And so let's start with the king of colours. Let's start with purple. Let's start with what happens when you take blue and you take red. Before 1856, purple could only be created using the squidgy ooze of the murex mollusk that was found lounging in the shallows of the eastern Mediterranean around the coast of Tyre. Being the total diva of the mollusk world, it meant that one squirt was really only enough to dye a fraction of an inch drop dead violet. So it took skiploads of this selfish shellfish to make any impact on your voluminous toga. As a result, purple was forbidden to all except the very mighty, and was almost certainly never seen out by the ordinary public. Until, that is, 1856, when Henry Perkin, who'd been mucking around with the Victorian equivalent of a chemistry set, accidentally created aniline chemical dye and, hey, accidentally created the perfect purple. Bam. Since then, purple has had a mixed rep. It hit the 60s hard, and of course it hit the 80s even harder. Prince wore purple out of sheer decadence. But why? Let's go back to 1856. Suddenly, in a world formerly denied purple, every shop window, indeed every shop girl, every streetwalker, footpad and cutpurse got head-to-toe hit by the purple stick. It was called the Purple Summer, and Charles Dickens recoiled in horror. Meanwhile, that Victorian super judgy designer Sir John Ruskin coined the phrase, "Purple is poison," thereby guaranteeing every wannabe decadent aesthete, dandy, or rock and roller ever since sees purple as their go-to opt-out shade of FU. It is funny. Whilst for us, going green is a good thing, a millennia ago, green was to be feared above all things. Put in the words of a teenage breakup, it's not green that changed, it's us that moved on. These days, all that we love about this most natural of colours is all that our forefathers dreaded. Because nature was chaos. Nature was wildness. In the greenwood ruled the green man, who destroyed humanity's efforts at civilization with his coiling tendrils of photosynthesizing wildness, blurring the straight lines of classical architectural perfection with his verdant mossiness. Basically, reminding us all that humans are just fragile squatters on planet Earth and that nature rules okay. In fact, in a lot of medieval manuscripts, the devil is green rather than red. And I suppose it didn't really help that Western Europe's sworn enemy during the oh-so-politically incorrect era of Crusade chose green as the background of their battle banners. When the cold snows of the Middle Ages thawed and the green shoots of the Renaissance started to grow, we became much more appreciative of Dame Nature, and we started welcoming her and her many shades of green into our newly built, classically inspired palazzi. But bright green was elusive. That particular shade of emerald mixed with chlorophyll proved impossible until, that is, some bright spark worked out that really green, Wizard of Oz green, could be achieved by using arsenic. Which is how it came about that people believed Napoleon died following a fatal encounter with his wallpaper. Yes, really. Exiled to a permanently damp, rocky outcrop of St. Helena, the former Emperor of France became unpleasantly ill and died a lingering death in a bedroom lavishly furnished with bright green flock wallpaper. Conspiracy theorists suggested that mold, precipitated by the dank climate, had caused the airborne release of tiny flock fibres that had been dyed dangerously green with arsenic and had then been breathed in by the emperor himself. Rather prosaically, when Napoleon's coffin was opened and his body examined, medics discovered his death was due to stomach cancer and not the beautiful but deadly green appeal of flock wallpaper. Orange, the fusion of yellow and red, is a funny colour historically. I suppose because it's everywhere you look in nature, from browny orange to orangey flame. Flowers are orange, the earth is orange, fruit is orange, sunshine is orange, birds, bees, beasts. It's a colour, I think, we've all rather taken for granted. But despite its ubiquity, it is actually essential to our well-being because when you think about it, shades of orange show that our raw food is cooked and therefore safe to eat. So, it must have been one of the first colours that our cave-dwelling ancestors recognised, appreciated, and respected. Orange is safe. Indeed, we go orange when we're well cooked. Chanel threw off centuries of tan phobia when she encouraged the international fashionista jet set of the 20s to set off their newly bobbed hair, their sleeve-free tennis dresses, and their daringly exposed calves with an all-over shade of terracotta sunburn. In Oriental mysticism, orange symbolised an ideal fusion between the yin and the yang of red and yellow, making it a celebratory sartorial choice for monkkind. The word orange is first found describing the colour orange in the Renaissance, and it would have been a deliberately exotic schmancification since it comes from the Moorish word for the fruit, which is orange. We find references to Henry VIII's sister Margaret wearing a gown of orange silk, whilst Henry himself was known to favour outfits, with coordinated copies of course, of something called tawny. Tawny is a kind of darkish, chocolatey orange, and I think it must have been a tad clashy on one of such ginger hirsuteness. But maybe that was the point. For this very British King of England, he wanted to look as indigenous as possible. Orange doesn't return to centre stage until the Victorians learned to cover its rather smothering warmth. They loved rooms to feel small, hot and cosy, and by thunder, orange does that to a room. In these rooms, they'd hang paintings by pre-Raphaelite romantics like Rossetti and Millet, who really got off on the way that shockingly ginger models, they'd spring forward from the dark greens and blues of their painted backgrounds. Look at Arthur Hughes's April Love and Holman Hunt's Light of the World. These are icons of ginger kind. The thing about orange is that in its purest form, it's just so darn visible. It's this uncompromising look at me-ness that surrounds us today. High-vis regularly flip-flops from safety first to fashion forwards, whilst for us baby boomers, we'll never ever be able to forget our 70s childhoods where everything from telephones to casseroles, baths to cars, Y-fronts to shag pile carpets, they were all very orange indeed. Now, onto black and white. Surely the simplest colour duo going. Certainly, modern culture uses monochrome as a palate refresher when tasting the rainbow feels a little bit too fruity. Man's first painted marks were made from black charcoal and white chalk. So there's always going to be something fundamental about these two warring opposites, light and dark, when they get together. What we see as black didn't really exist until after the Renaissance. Sure, you could make things black with paint or dye, but they'd never be a dense black, and they'd fade very quickly. So the black habits of monks or the black breeches of footpads were almost certainly a rather nasty, chalky slate grey in real life. Dyers discovered that the best blacks used everything they had, including the kitchen sink. So red, blue, purple, all very costly pigments. But put together, they'd make velvet as black and as silky as a mole's silkiest bits. This happened just as the colour-sated courts of Europe started to develop a penchant for Catholic fundamentalism. So, being phenomenally richly, phenomenally expensively adorned, but actually just wearing black, felt oh so very much on brand for this season's latest trends in the burgeoning Inquisition. White was always synonymous with purity, and until the 1600s, it was actually the preferred colour of mourning in Europe. Of course, it still is in India. But it didn't become a universal choice for blushing brides until Hollywood took weddings and Busby Berkeleyed them with a forest of arum lilies and an army of shiny-headed dancing fellas. White had its time in the sun with the birth of modernism. White paint, brilliant white paint, Simon Cowell teeth white paint only became possible when the right polymers met the right chemicals just after the First World War. So, weirdly, one of mankind's oldest colours became its newest icon shade. When Le Corbusier, which amusingly means crow, painted all his cutting-edge modern buildings blinding bright, ultra-modern white, white had arrived. But then white's opposite black has a moment in the 20s as well, because it was then that Chanel freed it from the exclusive connotations it had built up with modern mourning, and she created the little black dress. What could be more chic than a modernist, all-white room as the perfect backdrop to the latest LBD? Later on, I'll be taking all of this colour theory into the home, inspiring you to be rainbow warriors in your own front rooms. In the meantime, remember, colour isn't a right, it's a privilege. Now, if you haven't yet, I suggest you open wine and recline. As someone of taste and refinement, I suggest you subscribe to School of Flop so you get the latest before anybody else does.